What's up guys, my name is Liam and today we're going to be taking a look at the Dareu A950 Pro. This is a brand new lightweight 4K offering that I've been really looking forward to checking out. But is this going to be the perfect gaming mouse for you? Let's check it out. And before we get started today, I did want to let you know that this was sent out to me by metkeys.com. However, everything you're going to be hearing in this video today are going to be my own words and my own opinions. Starting out with the box, this is what it looks like from the front. Over here on the side, it just gives you some instructions. On this side, it does give you the features. This does have a Nordic MCU in it. It also has a 3395 sensor. Like I said, it has a 4K polling rate option. And just so you know, this mouse does actually come included with the 4K dongle inside. So it's not something that you need to purchase separately. And it also does come included with a 300 milliamp hour battery inside. They do state that the battery life lasts 150 hours. I do believe that is with the 1K polling rate. Typically with these 4K mice and a 300 milliamp hour battery, usually lasts me a couple days. I don't necessarily game for like 10 to 12 hours a day though. I usually game just a couple hours a day because I work quite a bit, but I have been using this all day while I've been working, and that's the type of life that I've gotten out of it. Coming over here on the mouse, they do have a white and a black version available. Here's what the top looks like, and then the bottom. Next up, right here underneath the mouse, this is where you do have the 4K dongle included. It does have a rubberized bottom on here, and it is pretty small. And then underneath here, they do include a white USB-C cable with the white mouse. It also does come with this premium carrying case or storage case. And then they have this envelope at the bottom, and inside the envelope, looks like it does come with a set of grips. Also has the user manual. And then lastly, inside, they do provide you with this card with an instruction guide, but this is all in Chinese. And then they also do come with an additional set of skates. So it does come with these corner skates on here, and then you do get a set of the bigger skates as well. Real basic functionality here. You do have your power button over here to the left. If it's in the middle, it's off. Switch it up to power the mouse on, and you can switch it all the way to the bottom to enable the Bluetooth mode. And then over here to the right, you have a button to change the DPI. The skates that do come included, they actually do feel really nice. I was testing them out on a bunch of different pads, and after I broke them in, they actually felt really smooth and like they worked really well. So I don't really have any desire to change these. I do kind of prefer the bigger style skate design lately if I'm not using dot skates. So I might actually end up throwing the bigger skates on here and trying those out. And then coming back over to the top, this mouse truly feels very premium. I'm actually really surprised how great it feels overall. The shell on it is just absolutely solid. I don't notice any issues at all with any type of bending, flexing. There's no noises being made when I squeeze on it, so no type of popping or anything like that. It feels great. This actually does come with a coating on it, and the coating, it does feel a little bit grippier than just a straight plastic injection mold coating, and you kind of can tell it's there. It's not as grippy as something like what comes on the Lamzu mice or on the Endgame Gear mice, but it does add a little additional grip. The coating, it does feel pretty smooth for the most part, but you do feel a little bit of texture in there, kind of like almost an eggshell texture to it. This is featuring those Kel micro motion switches in here. I didn't get a chance to open this up myself, but I do believe it probably could be some of those light blue switches or something like that, but they do feel pretty similar. And I am a fan of these switches. I do feel like they feel pretty lightweight. I haven't had any personal issues with them yet myself, but on mouse button 1 starting out, just a little bit of pre-travel, and they did a really good job with the post-travel on here if you are pushing from the middle of the switch there, which is typically where I actuate it with my grip style. If you could see here on the shape, it really does kind of curve down a bit towards the front and the rear. So I do kind of feel like the way that the button design is, I do feel like when you come up further on the switch, you do get a little bit more movement just with how curved it is. And it can barely make contact here with the base of the shell if you're pushing pretty hard on it, but nothing too bad. And actually the click implementation on here is really great. Even all the way in the back, you do get a really lightweight click, and it feels very consistent overall. And my experience with mouse button 2 has been really good. There is no pre-travel almost on mouse button number 2. Very little post-travel, again, unless you were to come up further on the switch. But overall, these switches, I do feel like they feel incredible. They do feel very premium. They're nice and tactile, very responsive, and overall, they've done a really good job. I'm really liking this scroll wheel a lot. I feel like it has great height to it. has really nice defined steps as you're scrolling it. The center button, when you push down on the scroll wheel, it's pretty lightweight, really easy to activate and spam. And I really like the design that they did with the rubber on here. It's incredibly grippy. And overall, I would say this is one of my favorite scrolls out there that I've definitely used recently. The side buttons feel incredible on here too. There's almost no pre-travel when you press on them. There is a bit of post-travel. You can push them in quite a bit. But once you do get in here deeper in the shell, there is a tight stop in the back. And there's very little play on them left to right, but overall they feel really good, really solid to use. One thing to note, the front side button from the rear side button, as you can see there's not a whole lot of space between them, so they do kind of blend together, but I never had an issue personally with getting them mixed up or confused or anything like that. And then on the front side button, same thing, very minimal, almost no pre-travel. A little bit of post-travel there, but the implementation overall, they feel really good. So let's go ahead and drop a click and quality sound check. When it comes to the weight and balance on my scale, looks like it's coming in at approximately 54.3 grams. They've done a real incredible job with the overall balance on this thing. Even though it is coming in at the weight that it does come in at, it does feel a bit lighter. Perfect front to back, perfect left to right. The design and look of the software, it does look different than anything else that I've used out there before. It is incredibly easy and simple to use. One thing I do want to mention about it is I'm not sure if this is just an early stage or not. It is kind of taxing on your computer when you start it up, even when you go to close it out, but you don't have to leave it running in the background while you're actually using the mice. What I found is once I opened this up, I did drop the debounce time, and the debounce time doesn't allow you to drop it to 0 milliseconds. The minimum that it goes is to 1 millisecond. But once I dropped that down to 1 millisecond, I went over to the next page. I changed my DPI. I set the polling rate to 4K. And then after that, I feel like I was good to go. And again, you can just close out the software. You don't have to leave it running in the background or anything like that. It does maintain these settings. And the performance, while I was using this in game, it felt great. They are using the CompX solution for the firmware for the mouse. But everything that I was throwing at it, I played some Counter-Strike, played some Apex Legends, tried a bunch of different mouse pads, and it really felt great all across the board. And when it comes to the shape, I was expecting something a little different with the shape as I was looking at it in the pictures. So it did take me a little bit of time to get adjusted to. I was expecting something a little bit closer to the feeling of the Razer Viper Mini, but it does feel pretty different from the Razer Viper Mini in my opinion. As you can see here, it does have a middle hump and it does taper off to the rear and to the front of the mouse. One thing I do want to note, however, is this rear end. It was a little bit different for me to get used to, especially recently since I've been maining all these different styles of rear hump mice. This does have a flatter feeling rear end on the mouse here, and the closest thing that I compare it to is something like the Razer Viper V2 Pro. I feel like in the hands it just kind of has that really slow taper from the top out to the rear. It doesn't taper off as quickly or aggressively like on something like the Razer Viper Mini. So it is a flatter feeling back here, and we'll get into comparing it to the Razer Viper V2 Pro here shortly. But another thing that I did want to mention as well is the bottom of the mouse. It is very flat and there is some curvature here. I was comparing this to other mice like the VGN Dragonfly. They seem pretty equal to the rear on the mice on the bottom, but the one thing that is different is I feel like the side profile on this mouse is really flat. And the best way I can describe it to you, if you can see the transition from the middle center, the most narrow part on the mice, and it is here, but the thing is I feel like on typical mice, when you come to the rear, usually there's more of a hump right here. So when you're holding it, you usually have some leverage if you were to grip it. Typically I do a claw grip, and I usually use this area right here to grip with my thumb. It kind of is just a really smooth, flat transition right there. So I don't feel like it feels as bulbous or wide as most typical mice do in this type of style. So for me, typically, I just had to play around with it for a while once I got it. I do feel like the way that it does have this flat out kind of back end on it, and the sides from bottom to top, as you can see, they're really flat. I do feel like this shape is incredible for fingertip grip, but for me personally, I was doing something like a pincer claw style grip, and I kind of found that for me personally, that seemed to work best with this type of a shape. And though this is more of a medium style mouse, if you do have smaller hands, I do feel like you can palm this pretty well. But again, like I said, if you are used to doing some type of a relaxed claw grip and you're used to having a lot of support in the rear, having a rear hump, you don't really necessarily get that type of feeling with this shape. All right, so first off, let's go ahead and throw it up against the Razer Viper V2 Pro. When you're using these, I do feel like the Razer Viper V2 Pro, the back end profile right here, and I guess I'll wait to show you that on the side, but it does feel like it's a little bit flatter on the rear. But one of the biggest differences is, even though these both are flatter style feeling mice, I do feel like the Razer Viper V2 Pro has much more aggressive curves, and it flares out much more aggressively to the front and rear of the mouse, to where, like I said, on the A950 Pro just overall feels flatter. And if you look at the mice from this angle, hopefully this will come through on the camera there, you can see there's a really aggressive hump right here for some type of a thumb support or something if you were to grip the mouse like that. Whereas again, like I was telling you on this one, it's just kind of flat here. It doesn't really have that hump profile there for your thumb. And then finally, looking at these from the side, like I was telling you, they both kind of have that slow taper off to the rear. So they have that flatter feeling. Again, I do feel like the rear does kind of stick up just a little bit more on the A950 Pro, to where it does feel a little flatter back there on the Razer Viper V2 Pro. But overall, besides the A950 Pro having much flatter sides than the Razer Viper V2 Pro, these two shapes really are not that far apart from one another. All right, next up, let's go ahead and throw it up here against the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition. As you could probably tell looking at these two side by side, I definitely feel like the A950 Pro feels like a medium style mouse. It doesn't feel as small as the Razer Viper Mini Signature Edition, and it also doesn't feel as big as the Razer Viper V2 Pro, so it is kind of somewhere in between the size of those. The Razer Viper V2 Pro is overall wider and longer, but coming over to the bottom side profile, the Razer Viper Mini does have way more aggressive curves on the side, and it does feel a bit more narrow as far as the overall width goes. The top profile, the way that it tapers off to the sides, they don't feel that far apart in the hands. I do feel like the A950 Pro, again, it just feels a bit bigger. It does feel a little bit wider at the top of the mouse. And then finally, coming over to the side profiles where you can see what I'm talking about, the Razer Viper Mini, I do feel like it curves off down to the rear way more aggressively. So in the hands, it does feel like a shorter mouse, and it is kind of easier to kind of move up further on the mouse if you're doing some type of a claw or aggressive claw to get some contact underneath your knuckles right here. And again, this has a real slow taper from the middle out to the rear, so it just kind of has a flatter feeling profile. Finally, I know I'm going to be getting a lot of questions to compare this versus the VGN Dragonfly. Both of these mice are incredibly similar when it comes to the overall size. I would classify both of these as being on the smaller end, but they're more of medium style mice. The VGN Dragonfly does have more aggressive curves on the side, so it does feel slightly just a little bit more narrow on the sides than the A950 Pro does. But again, overall, the size of these are almost identical, and it is barely that noticeable. It's more noticeable just how much of a more flat profile that the A950 Pro has on the sides. And it's the same thing on the side here. I do feel like the rear end does kind of flare out a bit more, and it's a bit more aggressive on the VGN Dragonfly. Whereas on the A950 Pro, it is just a little bit more flat on the sides. Coming over to the rear profile, as you can see, they taper off pretty similarly from one another, and they're not that far apart as far as the actual size feels in your hands. And then coming over to both of these mice from the side, on the A950 Pro, it does have more of a centralized hump, but again, like I said, it does have that real slow taper off to the rear, to whereas at the top of the VGN Dragonfly, it does feel flatter and lower profile, but then once it hits this kind of second point right here, it does drop off more aggressively to the rear. So I do feel like it's kind of easier to move forward on the VGN Dragonfly if you are gripping it from the rear. And it does kind of have this kind of hump that sticks out to give you some support underneath your knuckles if you were to do some type of a claw grip or aggressive claw grip. So though these feel really similar in size, these shapes do stand apart from one another and they do feel different in the hands. Alright guys, so that about wraps things up on the Dareu A950 Pro. Like I'd mentioned to you guys, I definitely feel like this feels like a bit of a step up as far as the overall quality goes. It does feel a bit more premium. I know a lot of people are going to be asking me how I feel about this mouse compared to the VGN Dragonfly, and I will say that this mouse coming with the 4K dongle, everything that it comes in at is coming in about $80. If you were to pick up, say, the Dragonfly F1, the MOBA edition, and you were to throw in the optional 4K dongle as well, it'd come in about $70. So you're looking at about $10 cheaper. At the end of the day, I think that they're both great options and I would absolutely recommend both of them. For me personally, I do slightly prefer the shape of the VGN Dragonfly over the A950. However, this does feel like a bit of an upgrade over that mouse. I do feel like the clicks, they feel better, they feel more premium, they feel more solid. Even though I do really like the VGN Dragonfly, the side buttons and the clicks, they feel just a little bit more mushy on there. So I do feel like this does feel tightened up, feels a little bit solid, the weight feels a little better, the balance feels a little better, has a more premium coating. So overall, it just feels like a little bit more of a premium product. So at the end of the day, it's really going to be your personal preference. But if this shape does look like it's going to be something that would work out for you, then I'd absolutely recommend checking it out. This has been a joy to use. And like I said, for the price that it comes in at, it does feel very premium. All right, guys, so if you have any questions or feel like I left anything out, please let me know down in the comments below. Aside from that, if you've enjoyed watching this video and you're interested in seeing more videos like this in the future, please drop this video a like and subscribe to my channel. I've left affiliate links down in the description below if you're interested in picking up any of these mice, and if you use code AIMADAPTMK and you're interested in picking this up, you can save $5 off of it. Thank you so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you in the next one.